AI, blockchain, chips, and data, the ABCDs of the digital age. And so I wear my orange pants and I do a sock reveal every Friday. But he's going on vacation tomorrow. So we recorded yesterday. And so I forgot I didn't remember long story short. I said for Bitcoin Pizza Day, I would just wear my pants and then tomorrow I'll wear shorts. So, and look, Bitcoin Pizza Day is important. And people make fun of Laszlo because, he gave away 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas. If he would have kept them, he'd have 1,000,000,001. Yeah, sure. But that transaction is one of, and it's not the only, but it's one of the key points that allowed us to get where we are. Like I say this all the time, the miracle of Bitcoin is not that we just went from 74K to 111K. It's not that we went from 10,000 to 60,000 or even 1,000 to 10,000. The miracle is that we went from 0.0003 to $1. That's the miracle. It's a classic case of supply and demand, and some unwinding of some very large leverage in the global system. So look, most people don't think about government bonds like ever. most people just don't until they get older, and then they love bonds. Old people love bonds because they're safe. But the average young person doesn't think about bonds ever. So the thing about it that's interesting, like if you ask someone in college, what do you want to be? Oh, I want to be an equity manager. I want to work on Wall Street. Okay, you want to be a high yield bond manager? What the hell are you talking about? You want to be a convertible bond manager? What the hell are you talking about? You want to do treasury arbitrage? What the hell are you talking? The bond market is actually orders of magnitude bigger than the stock market. The currency market is orders of magnitude bigger than that. So, the equity market, which is what everybody says they want to be, I want to be a hedge fund manager or portfolio manager, is actually a pretty small portion of total markets. And government bond markets are critical to a well-functioning, global society. And most importantly is the big three, right? US Treasuries, Japanese JGBs, Japanese government bonds, and European central bank bonds or government bonds. It's a little trickier over there because they kind of have a confederation. So, but the thing about fractional reserve banking that's actually a good thing, even though maxis hate it, is there actually is some there at the bottom of the rehypothecated stack. There is some value. Whereas in central banking, you push a button. Back then, you rolled a printing press and you literally printed money. So the Dutch created this printing press and they just printed money like it was nothing. And they passed it out to mercenaries and they built a mercenary force that conquered the most powerful fighting force in the world at that time. So the Netherlands became the global power. They had the world reserve currency, which is unfathomable. And then Napoleon, you probably heard of him, he came in and he conquered them. And then some of the clan that started the Dutch bank moved to the UK and they set up the Bank of England and they financed steamships and then they became the most powerful navy. And then we invented nuclear ships and we became the most powerful navy. So that's where we are today. But the problem with the dollar and the problem with bond markets, we had an auction earlier this week where they went to auction off bonds and no one showed up. There were no bids. And no, come on, no bids, zero bids, literally no bids. And we've only seen that one other time in modern history, and that was right during the global financial crisis. People owned stuff and they would try to sell it and there were literally no bids. Now think about it. If there's no bids for an assets, and that compressed interest rates, well, now here's the tricky part. Well, then these smart hedge fund guys come along and say, you know what? I can borrow at zero and I can buy assets that yield positive and I can borrow a lot. So I can lever up 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 times. If it's in the bond market, you could do it 100 to 1 leverage, 1% collateral. So that was called the Japanese carry trade. And that was going on. As long as interest rates stay zero, it's all good. Ueda-san comes in. So Ueda-san is the new central banker. And he said, that does not make sense. I am an academic, and I think we need to let the yield curve determine the normal price. So no more yield curve control, no more fixing of rates, no more stepping in to buy all the bonds. Boom. So now you have to unwind all this leverage. And so now people are selling not only Japanese government bonds, but US Treasury bonds. So remember the rumor when Trump started the tariff nonsense, right? We've had three big uses of tariffs in the history of the Republic. 1823 ended in depression. 1930 ended in depression. 2025, not saying we're going to end in depression, but that was the last two times. Tariffs are bad. They're dumb. They've always been dumb. They're never a good idea. They're a tax on your local citizens. Trump keeps saying, oh, well, for 100 years we had tariffs. Right, because until 1913, we didn't have income taxes. So yes, tariffs funded the government. We're like, bring it, Donald. Because here's the thing. We own a bunch of your treasuries. We want to have a weak currency, not a strong currency. Because if you're a mercantilist, if you sell stuff, you want a weak currency, not a strong currency. So they're like, come on. You know the anglerfish, the thing at the bottom of the ocean, it's got that little shiny thing. And so there's this famous trader, John Arnold, right? He worked at Enron and he became a natural gas trader. He's one of the most legendary traders of all time. He turned like 100K into, many, many billions. And I was with him do you remember the trade there was when oil was collapsing, was going from $100 down to 26. And there was this trader at this big hedge fund that was losing his ass. And he kept thinking, oil and gas prices were going to go back up. So I happened to be in the office when it was announced that this hedge fund and this guy, poor guy Brian, lost $6 billion in a day. And I said, John, how you feeling? He says, this is the happiest day of my life. What do you mean? What do you mean the happiest day of your life? He says, the anglerfish? He says, that's me. I'm just sitting here with my little thing, and there's this guy, and he's just coming closer and closer, and I'm going to eat him. And he ate him. So that's what China's doing, right? They're like, come on, Donald. Come on, Donald. Boom. So they're selling. And he said, well, I figure out the path of progress, and I buy land one circle outside, and I wait. And we're like, that's it? He's like, yeah, that's it. I'm like, you made $300 million doing that? That's okay. That's pretty good. So if you can intuit just the direction, you don't even have to be exactly right, but just get ahead of the direction. So what Masa's very good at. And so he built a fortune with his core company, but also with raising these funds that would invest in these innovations. And we made a ton of money in the early SoftBank funds on all kinds of innovation around SOLO-MO, social, local, mobile, in that period. And then, there's the famous Alibaba trade, and we did that with him. And so we did a bunch of things, Tencent and other things. So fast forward to today. So he, again, sees the future. He sees what's happening in digital, and he goes out and raises shit ton, technical term, of money from Saudi and all these other places for the Vision Fund. Now, my only criticism, and it's not of him, because it's probably not him personally. Again, at the risk of the lights going out, there's a reason Tether's located in the Bahamas. There's a reason that the banks they utilize are the same banks that got in trouble infinite time. Go just look at the banks and look at their history. It's not good. There's a reason that FTX was in the Bahamas right next door. So it's all connected. There's a reason that Cantor's CEO became the Secretary of Commerce. There's a reason that Cantor's the one doing this. So all that, and the lights didn't go out, so I'm okay. But that strategy, right? Bitcoin treasury strategy, it's a good strategy. Now, how good is it? Like, we know it worked for MicroStrategy, now Strategy B, which will eventually be Strategy Bank, because I think like Coinbase, they'll apply for a banking license, and those will be the banks of the future, although I can't call them banks because the banks get pissed off. But how much room is there for this? And I always love it. Like they're like, well, we're going to buy way more Bitcoin than strategy. Why are you comparing yourself to them? I mean, because it's to go to spring break, but we went. And my wife is a very type A, tight ship. She gets shit done. We're perfect, but I don't get anything done. I'm ADD. She's not. So together we're perfect. And she's like, I found my people. I found my people. These people, they don't cross the street when the light is red. They never litter. It's unbelievably clean. It's orderly. It's beautiful. This is amazing. And so culturally, mavericks have an advantage because the team will follow them and do exactly what they say, exactly how they say it to perfection. And look at their engineering and look at their innovation and look at Sony. And I mean, just look at history. Japan is pretty good at stuff. So Simon, who is, people, like, oh, he's just that guy behind the monkey PFP like you. Like, yes, we share a common bond through on-chain monkey. And that's kind of how we met, actually. But he's a very, very Harvard smart, super smart, like crazy smart. Harvard educated Goldman equity derivatives trader. It got way more press than it should have because of this energy. So that's, again, a lot of things about it, but it started with, Brian, your point on regulatorily, there was an arbitrage. It's better to own Bitcoin in this wrapper than to own it directly. As crazy as that sounds, not your keys, not your coins. It was better if you're a Japanese citizen. You couldn't buy ETFs. They were against the law still. They're coming. And there are other companies that have actually bought Bitcoin too. But that's the second difference. They had all the advantages of Japan and taxation, but they didn't have Simon. And leadership matters. Like MicroStrategy without Saylor. I don't know if you've ever watched much of Saylor, but his brain works differently than other people's. Have you seen the clip of him talking about Apple from like 13 years ago?
Yep.
His brain works differently, right? I mean, everything he said was so logical now, but 13 years ago, people said no. He wrote a book. He wrote a book 15 years ago predicting FANG. Like, he's like he so much film. I know the moment the guy releases where it's going to bounce. That was not the answer anyone was expecting, right? No one was expecting that he was watching the spin of the ball coming off the guy's hand to know when it hit the rim, it was going to do the opposite and go to the left side. And look, that was Gretzky. Gretzky's dad had the famous line, right? You don't want to skate to where the puck is. You want to skate to where the puck is going. And if you watch Gretzky play or any great hockey player, they're always in that spot. And you're like, how did that happen? It's because in chess, it's called, I can't remember the German word for it, but it's the move before the move. Okay? So you don't win on your move. You win on the moves that you make setting up the move that you're going to win. And the rebounding is such a great example because people don't think of rebounding as the most important skill. They like shooting, they like, dribbling, but it's getting possession. Like I watched this, someone said, what am I doing for fun these days? All I do now is watch lacrosse. From February to June, I watch a lot of lacrosse because my son plays and I'm a fan of college and this is the big weekend. So I watch a lot of lacrosse. Lacrosse existed, but it wasn't in a nice form like that. And in fact, if it wasn't in Encyclopedia Britannica, it really didn't exist. So finding that information was really tough. And in fact, if you think about investing in that environment, it was all about information access. To your point earlier on the quote, right? You either have to be first, you have to cheat, which, remember Wall Street, right? How did Bud Fox get his information? He cheated, right? He would go in people's office and look, or he would follow the guy around. That wasn't cheating. That was actually just good diligence. In fact, I love telling a story. There was this hedge fund manager, amazing guy. He was the first one to buy Apple big. This is 20 plus years ago. And his thesis was, it was like single digits back then. And his thesis was they're going to sell 1 million iPods this year, right? You know, the iPod, the little music thing. And the street was like at a couple $100K. And I said, Brett, how do you know they're going to do 1 million? He says, I hired a bunch of college kids and I sent them to the mall and I asked them to ask the stores how many they're selling. And I said, no way. You know, they're not going to tell. He says, Mark, are you joking? You asked a minimum wage person their opinion? They bored. I wish I had taken a picture of it, but there were no, quick cameras back then. I mean, he gave me like a $500,000, McKinsey consulting thesis on talent acquisition and retention. And it was a masterclass. And that was on a random question. The only other person I've ever seen close to mental acuity of that was Bill Clinton, who I don't really like as a person, but as a brain, this is amazing. He was the headliner for a UBS. It was actually UBS. So I was the warm-up act. So I was on with a panel, and then he came as the headliner. And I got to shake his hand. That's the only time I ever met him. And talk about charisma. In that 5.5 seconds, we were best friends. It was unbelievable, the power. I was like texting my wife, I'm going to leave my job and go work for the Clinton Foundation, which I'm glad I didn't because it's bad. But
I heard there's a body count, Mark. I heard there's a body count around there.
There is a body count. It's bad. That's Hillary. It's not Bill. It's Hillary. It's all Hillary.
Mark,
All Hillary.
real quick before transitioning, because you were on the Ken Griffin note, there's something notable that
Making mistakes is part of life, and it's called the next trade. Right? It's the next trade, right? Or no,
it's the last trade.
The last trade. So, okay, now what's important about that? That's okay. The last trade. So
Bennett Planet was your next trade. Bitcoin's your last trade when you cycle out of those gains
no,
into the
no.
last
The
trade.
last trade. Okay, I love that. No, that okay, that again. But if you think about, we're all making mistakes, and the thing about investing is the mistakes make you better. So as you get older, you actually get better at this, which is kind of cool. And there are lots of things where that's true. But anything really that's mental as opposed to physical, as you age, is tougher. I mean, I tried to sprint the other day and pulled my calf, and it was just so embarrassing. But so Dean Smith, famous coach from here, has the great line that when you make a mistake, you got to Ralph. You got to recognize it, admit it, learn from it, forget it. Okay, and that's the most important. Because Coach K, that other team, University of New Jersey at Durham, that other team, Coach K, for the next 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever. And what does that mean? Well, today central banks buy gold, they put it in warehouses, and then they have, Fedwire, ACH, and the Visa, MasterCard networks. I don't actually use physical money anymore. I just use my credit card, and I settle up once a month. And so those rails are supported by the banking industry, and it's about a 7 trillion with a T suck from people. And it's great for Jamie Dimon and all the banks. That gets disrupted by stables. So, if I want to send money to my mythical mother-in-law in El Salvador, my mother-in-law's in Tulsa, but if she was in El Salvador and I sent her money, it would cost 30 cents on the dollar to send her through Western Union. But if I use Strike app or stablecoin, I could do it for free. So that's better. Okay. But, somebody's gain, where, someone said, geez, you got to go to this event because, we've done the math and there's a lot of voters and they're one issue voters. And if you say these things about Bitcoin, and I'm sure some of you guys were there, he got up on stage, and my favorite part was, he does the free Ross and everybody's happy. But my favorite part was when he said, and on day one, I will fire Gary Gensler. And the crowd went batshit crazy. And you could see in his eyes, he's like, oh my God, that was like a drug. That was awesome. Like, I'm going to say that again. And he said it again, and the crowd went even more batshit crazy. And so he didn't believe any of this stuff. But David Bailey and others have really done a good job educating. And, whether it's Barron or Eric or, whatever, but there's been some education. And again, I don't think, Donald's walking around with a Bitcoin account that he's going to pay stuff. He tried doing it at the pub key one time and it didn't work. But I'm not making this up, who was the head of cybersecurity at NTT Docomo in Japan, back to Masa, and maybe they're friends. Literally, his name's Natoshi Sakamoto. I mean, could not make that up. So he said, yeah, that all could be true, but the way you're thinking about a backdoor is impossible because of the air gap. Now I said, with Ethereum, it could happen. I was like, oh, wow, I didn't ask that question, but okay. So I think ultimately, I think the technology is here to stay. I think it is the future of money. I think it is digital gold, even though people don't like that. They want to be a peer-to-peer electronic, but it is. I can a lot more than $0. How about from people's purse or wallet? The further you are from the source, the more risk. So you're at Coinbase, and they didn't hack Coinbase. They paid humans to give them information. And, someone asked me this about the severed fingers this morning. They said, don't you worry about this? I'm like, I don't, only because, one, I don't talk about, my Bitcoin as much as I can on online. And there are plenty of people who have way, 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 way more than I do. But 29 years old, he's from that school down the road, Duke. But so he had a lab in college. He's a material science guy. And we've all experienced that our phone gets hot. And I can't see it, but my computer actually sits on a little box to get airflow under it because it heats up and turns off, which is not a very good feature. But, and that's Apple. And if Tim Cook were alive, that would not happen. But, God rest his soul. So he said, well, you know why it gets hot? Is you get memory here and processor here, and the electrons have to go back and forth. And the faster they go, the more friction, the more heat. So what if we use photons instead of electrons? People are like, you can't get photons from silicon. It's like, I know, but we're going to put liquid crystal on the silicon and then I can use photons. I'm like, you can't do that. It's like, well, I did it in my lab. So he's done it. And if we transition from electrons to photons, I mean, the exponentialness of processing power and the expensiveness of, so that's one that I'm...
Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and enabling post notifications for more content on crypto and digital assets. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps with the YouTube algorithm and keeps the content coming. Thanks for your support. Enjoy the video.